We're missing Suarez.
All right.
There he is.
I'm here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just happened, and it's not going to happen again. I was trying to switch to put some content on the screen, and then it just literally canceled everything when I tried to put content on the screen. It's so freaking weird. But anyway, could you continue what you were saying, Dust, while I
Yeah,
reshare
I
all
was
this
saying
to more
that
people?
um, I do not believe there was this election does not represent a overall change in the sentiments of the working class and oppressed against Trump. It just means they were dissatisfied with Biden, so there was lower turnout. And I believe this is also the case within the Latino community, Raza, as well as the African community, was the people who were pro-Trump and navigated toward Trump already, they came out to vote. And many people who are against Trump did not come out to vote. And it does, and this change in percentage, specifically in the Latino community, does not represent a change in sentiments amongst the people.
Well,
And there is a deep resentment. There's a deep resentment against Trump, Trumpism, and his anti-immigrant rhetoric that we can tap into, particularly within the more working class, undocumented, and proletarian portions of the Latino immigrant community and Raza generally.
Well, let me address that as well. I mean, there was towns on the border with Mexico, predominantly Latino, um, like in Texas, where it was like 98% of Latinos voters voted for Trump, like near 100%. And why that sudden change since 2016? Because he definitely changed his rhetoric. He appealed to the Latinos in town halls in 2016 and even talked to them. And he kept saying, look, I'm not against immigrants. I'm only against the criminal ones. And then when they asked Democrats about that, they said, oh, they're just misogynist. So they started saying anti-Latino racist things, assuring that Latinos won't vote again for Democrats for at least a generation. But that was a factor. It wasn't the main factor of why he won. But yes, some Latinos in certain areas of the country changed their mind about Trump. And part of that's because of the rhetoric of Trump changed. And also Americans and Latinos are Americans as well. We tend to, and that doesn't apply to me, but to a large section of the population, I call it selective amnesia, right? So a lot of them forgot or were too young to remember a lot of Trump's more racist rhetoric in 2016, and they don't pay attention to CNN and those other outlets that would show clips from back then as well. So,
yeah, I gotta say that it honestly, also we gotta remember that Trump could have said anything with how poorly the Democrats were for this term. It was just, I think, the nail in the coffin for reality, because they literally talked about on Jamal Thomas show. Shout out to Jamal Thomas, by the way. So I don't agree with everything he says, but he's a true lefty. He said he has somebody on. I can't even think of the source name, but they basically was saying that when the Teamsters decided not to endorse anyone this year, Kamala was pissed, and when she met one of the officials there at a gathering, she literally told them, "You guys need to fall in line." Like, there was just that so much elitist type of entitlement that the liberals were emboldened to display with the Democrats. And it's like, during a genocide, you have this much entitlement is just really, really insane, that you are the party that, but majority of people on the left are showing everyone that you are a part of genocide, and you think you could win during genocide. Like, Trump literally had the perfect comeback on both sides, with him changing up the way he wanted to do things and say things, and also with how much the Democrats just sat on their asses. They didn't really produce anything that was valuable at all. It just gave false promises, to the point that even Teamsters, I'm a Teamster, I was shocked. I was shocked when I saw that. When I only saw local chapters endorse her, and not the national chapter. That's the first time in
You know what the
history.
Democrats said when Kamala lost? We need to get Fetterman next time. This is
Oh,
the most
God.
pro-Zionist of all the Democrats. He
They
literally
heard
had
nothing.
Dan Kovalik, my comrade, thrown out of a restaurant for asking him a question about Palestine. And that's what their lesson was. They sent Bill Clinton to Michigan to tell Arabs that, well, the Jews were there first. You got to put up with it. You know, it's just like, are you kidding me? And
Don't know
then
history
after when
at
they
all.
lost, they still didn't learn the lesson. They want to have Fetterman be the presidential candidate next. I mean,
Right.
this is a losing party, man. It's just, if this is not stupidity, I don't know what else what is.
Yeah, they're a lost cause, and people were talking about how, oh, does this mean that there's a nail in the coffin for the Democrats, that the Democrats failed because they're just blaming each other? I mean, at the end of the day, I guess as socialists, we're not surprised, right, that this happened. Like, we're really not, but just during a Trump election is just like, oh my God, like I could see, because Trump exposes capitalism. He exposes
Yeah.
everything that we fight against. He shows it in such an ugly face, and they know it as well too, which is why they hate him so much. They don't hate him because of his policies. They hate him because he shows exactly who they all are. That's what the truth is.
I don't
And
know
they
if
don't
they
like
hate him though. I think they like him. The Democrats like losing to more overt racists because then they can get back into power and they don't have to do anything other than not be overtly racist.
Well,
Yeah.
And
also
then when they get
remember
to
Biden.
power
Remember
and they
Biden
don't
wore
do
the MAGA
anything,
hat
then they're
and kind of
perfectly happy to
sabotaged.
pass the torch back, and it's a relay race.
He kind of
And the
sabotaged
Imperials, they win
Kamala's
every time.
campaign. I think he resented Kamala for pushing him out, and he secretly supported Trump.
who.
And he kind of like had one of those
Biden?
moments where he was showing how he really felt when he wore that MAGA hat. Like he took the MAGA hat from one of the counter protesters and put on his head. And then, the Trump supporters in the crowd were cheering him and he kept it on his head. He was basically saying, I don't want this. He didn't even want Kamala to win.
No, he didn't.
No, but it's a relay race. And I think we do need independent power amongst the working class and oppressed to oppose fascism. We're not going to support the Democrats in the Trumping into stopping Trump's fascist appeals and fascist rhetoric and fascist policies. When the Democrats are just simply enacting the same fascist policies with more effective rhetoric.
Well,
and
there's
more
two different
effective
things you
appeals
have to
to
look
general
at.
population.
There's liberal reformists and there's neoliberals. Neoliberals I'll never work with because they're facilitators of fascists, they're traitors, they're two-faced, they're counter-revolutionary. Joe Stein always said you can't work with a counter-revolutionary party. That's the Democratic Party. Now, there's
They're the
reformers,
Bolsheviks.
and there's even independent reformers who are liberals who are not, as radical, and I consider myself radical. There's a lot of socialists that you could potentially work with, not for, in certain contexts of United Front, more bourgeois elements, but that are not neoliberals. So, there's a difference between the two.
Yeah. I mean, it's just we're
Revolutionaries were not
really at a
reformists.
point.
Yeah.
We need a vanguard party at this point that
Mhm.
can push the working class to a revolution. And
Movement build.
I understand in what they call first world countries, more developed nations, it's a lot
Mhm.
harder than in underdeveloped nations. But I believe it's possible. I will always be optimistic. That's why I'm a freaking Marxist to begin with. Optimism.
Optimist realist is what I consider myself to be. You have to
And
have the realist side as well. It's like, what did Arafat say to the UN? He said, I have a dove in one hand and a gun in the other. Don't make me use this gun, right? So you have, you're an optimist. You have the dove there, the peace. You got to be realist too. You got to be ready to fight because you're revolutionary. So
then we got to defend ourselves because, I mean, well, I think that what we're seeing right now is the beginning of the last time a Republican this popular made it, the Democrats didn't have any chance for over a decade. And, as popular as Trump is because of the reactionary response of how awful the country is, maybe we are looking at that right now where we're going to have a Republican after him and in the second
I'm not
term.
seeing that. I don't think Trump, I won't characterize Trump as popular, even though he won the popular vote. The majority of people did not vote. And I still think the Democrats are the more popular and stronger party of the two. And they'll probably be reelected. As worsening conditions happen, we may see a lot of one-term presidents.
You know, Lee Camp always says that there's virtually no difference between Republican and Democrat, except when it comes to certain social issues like abortion, which was a big deal here in Florida. We couldn't quite get it passed. I think it was like 55%. Now it's got to be by 60% margin to defend women's rights.
That's why the
recent,
Democrats are the more popular party, is because they, at
I
the
was gonna
very
say
least,
the reason-
virtue signal on the right side of many social issues. And the majority of the population supports those policies. But the Democrats, we look at abortion, they didn't codify it in the law. They're
That's what I was
okay
about
with
to say. You wouldn't let me finish my point.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
They
Go ahead.
They wouldn't codify Roe versus Wade intentionally, so they could use that as an issue. And also, like for example, Hillary Clinton's response to Bernie Sanders was finding the most right-wing Democrat possible, who was completely anti-abortion. That was her VP pick. She was like telling them, "Please don't vote for me. Go vote for Jill Stein." I mean, that's the stupidity of the Democrats, and it continues on. And then, of course, they blame the voters of the Greens for this happening. It says we're all Russian agents, like they did with the Huru. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that excuse is finally dying. Thank God. It was so annoying, like so annoying, and people really believe that so heartedly. I mean, I've been around circles with people that are just really nice liberals, and you mention anything Russian, they get a frown face, they freak out, and I'm just
Also,
like,
the Eurocentric.
what are you freaking out about?
Story?
You don't even know anything about that country.
Well, remember that story I told you about that so-called progressive woman at the protest, that she was ranting and raving and how much better the French are than us. And so first I said, well, they do have better laws there where people don't have to worry about being retaliated against and losing their jobs. So they're more fearless when it comes to going out and protesting. She didn't want to address that. She just wanted to say like the French culture is superior to ours. And I said, what about what they're doing in Africa? As soon as I said that, complete silence. I never heard another thing from her. But that's the thing about Eurocentric people, even when they're saying they're on their left, when they're showing up to protest, you know, so a lot of them, the Europeans can do no wrong, or they're looking at everything what's going on in Europe, completely ignoring what's happening south of the Rio Grande, the incredible movements that are emerging in Mexico. Just in Mexico nearby, Claudia Sheinbaum's taken over, and she's already stood up to Trump. And this is AMLO's ally. AMLO was extremely popular.
Right. And she was telling Spain, y'all better apologize.
She said, why don't you, with the tariff threat, and she told Trump, she said, why don't you stop causing the migrant crisis and lift the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba? That's the first conversation she had with Trump. And I'm like, yes, this is what Jill Stein was saying back in 2016, mind you, about the migrants from Central America. She said the U.S. imperialism is causing it. And here you have a head of state telling Trump this directly, which is great. I don't know if he's going to do anything about it, but, you know, at least somebody standing up and saying the obvious.
Yeah. No,
I got to be up
but
early in the AM to run these loads of lumber. So I got about 13 minutes left. And I wanted to make a comment on the title, Resolution Revolution. And I think it's a very ambitious title. I would say in the current conditions, I do not see a revolutionary situation. In the United States, it's still taking part in the oppressed nations, is where the revolutionary force is. And within the United States, within the belly of the beast, I think even though there is a shrinking labor aristocracy, there is still a labor aristocracy. And that falling labor aristocracy, the first thing they're turning to is fascist rhetoric, like Trump. And I think as revolutionaries, I think the right opportunists who are trying to appeal to the broader population, many of them falling labor aristocracy, petty bourgeois, trying to appeal to those folks, I think we should have the exact opposite strategy. those who are the most revolutionary in the United States are the international proletariat in the United States, which is concentrated within the oppressed nations and the poorest of white people. And I think they still have the least to lose, and are more likely to act, even if out of desperation. I think the revolutionary force always comes from outside, but then revolutionaries go in, learn from the people, take in what they have, give that revolutionary spirit to the people, and then learn and change themselves to better serve the people. But I think we do need to get to, as organizers, to get as lower and deeper in the proletariat as possible. And that is a big problem on the left, even with a lot of parties I respect. You see them in the coffee houses, and I ain't got no problems against the university students. They were really cool on Palestine. I think there is a disconnect between the more middle class left and the proletariat, the undocumented workers, the people in the Black Belt South, the people in the hoods, the people in the hollers, and the people we really need to get to. And regardless of what they're saying with their words, if their class position puts them in their very survival diametrically opposed to the current system. And I think right there is where the revolutionary mass, even if I'm not saying if you're middle class, you can be a class trader. If you're from the elite, you can be a class trader. But your movement that you build and you represent has to be of and for the deepest and lowest of the proletariat amongst the poorest and the oppressed within the United States.
When I was organizing Hands Off Venezuela, North Florida, at UNF in 2022, at the time of the Russian liberation of Ukraine, it was a very contentious issue. Like, students would come out and they would support the U.S. ending the sanctions against the people of Venezuela. But as soon as I started talking about Russia, they were completely indoctrinated by the propaganda and didn't want nothing to do with me. So unfortunately, that was a contentious issue. And you're correct. Probably some of those same students later took part in the Palestine protests. But as soon as it comes to Ukraine, because they're completely ignorant on the subject and they're completely reliant on the corporate press, they have the wrong position, unfortunately. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I don't know how to break that. I really don't. It's kind of sad because they have such great organizational skills. And just imagine what they can do if they fully did not drink the Kool-Aid of the U.S. propaganda. It will be short. Like what I'm trying to do, explain to people. I'm like, look at how much Europe has lost just believing in this Ukraine war.
Hey, how you been?
400,000 are dead now, and it's inevitable with Ukraine. But they
this
still
is Conrad
keep trying.
Hello.
Hello.
But I think you could convince these youth by saying, because a lot of them assumed Ukraine was going to win, the war will be over in 6 months. Here we are 2 years, almost 3 years later, right? February next year? It's going to be 3 years if it continues on, because Trump claims it's going to end it. But I don't know.
He claims, yeah. We'll see.
You could tell them, look at all the deaths of Ukrainians. This has hurt Ukrainians. Why? Because they don't want a democratic decision to be accepted. The referendum.
I don't like the "we'll see it" phrase when it comes to Trump and Ukraine. Trump has already been president, and the only reason why he threatened to take funds from the Nazis in Ukraine was to try to spill the beans on Biden's son, who was recently blatantly pardoned. But the second he was impeached, he raised the money and escalated the tension. So we know without a shadow of a doubt that Trump, when confronted with any pressure, because he is all about himself and the ruling class is firmly in control, he will be bent to their will in an instant. And we know for a fact every single conflict will be escalated under Trump, just like it was under his tenure. There is no let's
This
wait
is
and
why
see.
it's
He's
this
not
is
a
why
de-escalation president.
this is why quite possibly
escalate.
though you could, the reason why you could quite possibly be wrong about that and is because he had a mandate of 5 million more votes than Kamala, which is very significant when it comes to U.S. politics because they're usually very close. So yeah, it's true. Most Americans didn't vote that were eligible to vote, but of those who did, 5 million more of them voted for Trump. And this was Trump that was promising them within a week of becoming elected, even before becoming inaugurated, that he would end the war in Ukraine. He consistently said that in his rallies, and the people
The
voted for
votes
him
don't
and
matter.
mandate. So
They'll change the
pressure,
rhetoric. They're not going to change their policy. They're not going to
if he's
affect their
pressured
profits. They're
by
not
the military,
de-escalating the war anytime soon. And all it is virtue signaling. Obama won,
if he's,
virtue signaling against
let
the
me
war
finish my point,
escalated.
John. You can say whatever you
Trump
want.
won. There will be no de-escalation of the war under
If he's
Trump. That's
pressured
not
on
possible.
that, if he's
I am
pressured on that,
100% true. There's no wait and
we have
see.
to
There
consider
is
two
no wait and
things.
see. There's no
Not just
active. I mean, they
let me make the
crushed
second
the
point, then you
student
can say whatever
movement.
you want.
They crushed
So
the student movement.
the other thing we
And
need to consider,
barely is anybody
Gus,
talking.
let me make the
Yeah,
second point, then you can say whatever you want.
go ahead.
So we have to consider, besides the mandate, that Zelensky is scared to death of Trump, and he's a complete coward, and he'll do anything that Trump tells him. I mean, it's probably the easiest thing in the world. In 30-second conversation, all he has to do is just make the deal, give some land back to Russia. End of conversation. A deal will be made immediately. Zelensky already accepted a deal with Russia in Minsk, giving some land to Russia. And the only reason why he reneged on it is because the U.S. told him so. He'll do anything the U.S. tells him. He's scared to death of Trump. So Trump has the mandate and has the fact that Zelensky is very willing to work with Trump to reach a deal with Russia. The only thing that could put a stop to it is, the military leaders pressuring Trump. Yeah, that's true. Other factors too.
They hold the purse string. They hold the power. Trump is completely for his self-interest. It is not in the interest of the elite to de-escalate these wars. These wars will not be de-escalated under Trump. I do not see it happening. It's no wait and see.
Also, there was talk.
We have a vote mandate. This is the United States. We do not live in a democratic procedure whatsoever at all. I mean, the Republican Party would barely exist if it wasn't for anti-popular laws like gerrymandering and the Electoral College. Like
Are you
a
familiar with?
mandate. The voting has no power in the States. The ruling class is firmly in control.
Are you
There will be
familiar
no
with?
de-escalation.
Are you familiar with the report that came out from Pepe Escobar, who's revealed stuff from the Kremlin before that turned out to be true? And Karma Jamar and I discussed it on the show the other night. He's come out and said there was a deal that was done behind the scenes between Putin and Trump, where Trump would give Putin free reign in Ukraine. In exchange, Putin would withdraw support of Assad, let the revolution, the counter-revolution happen in Syria, let the Israelis do what they want in the Middle East. It was a backdoor deal very similar to what happened with Brezhnev and President Johnson. Did you hear about this at all?
No, but it makes sense. Looking at it long term, we were supposed to talk about Syria tonight. If you look at the reason why the U.S. imperialist-backed terrorists lost initially in Syria was because of Russia's victory, Russia's help of Syria. And now, after the United States escalated the civil war in Ukraine, and Russia was forced to humanitarianly intervene, and now they're bogged down, we recently had the total collapse of the Syrian government. And it's a travesty. And honestly, when we look at it, a lot of people like to talk about Russia, how the United States hates Russia because they want to take their resources. They got a lot of land, they got a lot of oil, they got a lot of gas. They want to take those resources. But I think the main threat of Russia isn't their oil and gas, nor does the United States truly want their oil and gas. I think the main threat of Russia is Russia simply out of self-national interest getting in the way of exploiting the oppressed nations by offering better deals and offering military alliances.
Same thing with China.
And I think you're right about it, but I don't think that's necessarily a deal. Let's say things that comes to a stalemate, and Russia. I don't really see that as a true de-escalation, maybe specifically, but that's just a transfer of escalation from Europe to the oppressed nations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing in Syria
Well, I'm
now.
not saying I would support that deal because the deal sells out the oppressed nations of the Middle East. But I'm saying if that deal was true, that means that Trump saying that Putin can have free
I
reign
see
in
what you're
Ukraine,
saying.
unless he will be forced to make a deal.
I
I mean,
would
this
agree that
correlates
we
now
will see a
with their
transfer of
reaction.
escalation, but we will not see a de-escalation overall under Trump. Maybe regional de-escalation of Ukraine, but not
Oh, not
escalation.
worldwide. Not
Yeah.
worldwide at all. Trump is completely anti-Palestinian. I agree with you on that.
And more hawkish on China.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we'll have
Which
to
is ironic.
see.
You buy a MAGA hat. Guess what? You buy a MAGA hat, and it's made in China. It's true. If you buy a MAGA hat, it's made in China.
Yeah.
That's what their America first thing is Israel first or China first. I mean, they're complete hypocrites.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see, guys. Honestly, it's a lot of interesting, a lot of sad, interesting what ifs is happening right now. And lastly, before we wrap up, we have 10 days before the Orange Man is officially in office. So we as leftists are definitely going to be on it, making sure that we see what's going on. And I love the contradictions that people that you guys have brought up with the
Well,
EU,
Florida
especially
will
the
have one less
deportation.
fascist,
Like
right?
the
He's
contradiction
moving
is
from
crazy.
Mar-a-Lago to Washington, so at least we got rid of one fascist in the state.
Right. Florida is just a powerhouse for Republicans right now.
Well, also for Latin American fascists, Guaido lives in Miami.
Yeah.
Bolsonaro lived in Orlando for a time.
Jesus.
That was an
That
interesting
beautiful
phenomenon.
land.
Democrats won the governorship in North Carolina and the school superintendent. A lot of Trump supporters didn't left the ballot blank and only voted Trump.
Wow.
So a lot of Democrats there was actually a positive shift, which I believe on the local level. Do you know how I disagree with you on Trump on the federal level being changed from neoliberal to fascist? On the local level in North Carolina, if you look at the Republican policy, specifically towards the lower working class and oppressed communities, local Southern Republicans are fascist.
Mm.
And there was a little bit of a blowback against them, even though there was a Trump victory, which was interesting. I'll just make my final point.
Is that Chris Penn, by the way, that's in the picture on your shirt? Chris Penn and Keanu Reeves?
Yeah. It's,
that's some old school right there.
That's the wind, dude. But no, I just say talk to your neighbors, get lower and deeper in the proletariat.
By the way, that's the perfect example of his brother. The perfect example of what I was alluding to earlier with my encounter with the students. Sean Penn was best friends with Hugo Chavez. He loved Chavez, but he's completely now enamored with Zelensky. So you have people that take a pro-Latin American position, but as soon as when it comes to Ukraine, they're on the other side. So because they don't know history or they have a limited scope of history. So
yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much, Dust. We got to get you back on the show, man. And sorry about the technical difficulties earlier, guys. It was literally the most oddest thing that happened.
You've been on most of the show, even feeling sick under the weather. So thank you so much for still doing the show and for taking part in most of it, Comrade Jamar.
Yeah, and thank you for not letting me go into my wallowness because clearly
and thank you for your contribution, Comrade Dustin. I'm looking forward to the new year. It is ambitious to call for the resolution to be revolution, if that's going to be possible. Oh yeah, one last thing, Zelensky, Kerensky. Kerensky was in power for how long before the Soviet Union emerged? Like 1 year. And he was a reformer that was trying to bring back some form of monarchy, but the Bolsheviks didn't have it. They were the most organized group. And a lot of people are saying the same thing. 1917 is impossible that there's going to be a revolution in Russia. Kerensky will stay in power. And that's not what happened, right? So maybe something like that will happen next year. I tried to be optimistic and realistic at the same time, as mentioned. But I think we need to strive for that new society. So thank you.
Yeah, always. And to everyone out there in the airwaves, have a really good night. And we'll see you later. Next the next 2 weeks.
Couple Thursdays on the line.
8:30 p.m. this is the spot. This is the place to get your late politics. Thank you so much, guys, and to my co-host Alex Flores. And have a really good night.